Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today we have another amazing guest. Today's guest, she is a multi-faceted, passionate wife, mother, small business owner, pole fitness instructor, beach enthusiast, born and bred in Florida. She's also a free thinker. Her expansion into the coaching world was fueled by two major events in her life. The first, nearly bankrupting her first business, a meal prep company in her local area. The second, finding herself deeply dissatisfied with the life she'd built that was supposed to be everything she wanted for herself. Both of these events, in their own way, thrust her into an accelerated journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance. Today, she helps her clients uncover and unleash their potential and discover confidence, success, fulfillment, and freedom. So a warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, Dianne Hatke. How are you, Dianne?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for answering my random email that appeared in your inbox from nowhere. You're thinking, who is this guy? Who is this guy talking about My Perfect Failure? But it was lovely to have an initial discussion with you. I'm super keen to have a conversation with you today. So your journey to this point has been an amazing one. And today's episode is kind of like really around relationships and about how they can be challenged, how they can be difficult, and how we can get lost, but how we can try in our own way to navigate through those. And you've got quite a unique story. I don't want to go too much into this because you know it better than me, but I think because of the times we're in the pandemic, and I think relationships, are even more under strain and scrutiny because we're spending more and more time with our partners. And I think there's a lot of people potentially not knowing how they can sort of release the tension and what to do. So maybe I should shut up and let you maybe explain who you are and maybe tell us about your unique story.
Sure. You want me to go ahead and dive in?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because it's a unique story and it's very personal to you. So I don't think that I can do it justice by skirting around the edges. So I'm going to let you dive in and I'll interject as and when.
Okay. Yeah. Pop in. Cause I tend to get into my story and then I just don't stop until it's done. You're like, hold on. Just give me a signal.
I'm going to let you dive in because I talk too much. So I'm going to let you dive in.
No, you're fine. Okay. Yeah. So my story started, oh my gosh, I could go all the way back to the beginning, but we don't have time for that. Yeah. Basically, I found myself deeply dissatisfied in my marriage. Back in at the beginning of 2019 is when I came to my husband about it, but it was something that I had been sitting with for quite a while. I mean, probably since the day we got married. We got engaged, found out we were pregnant about 4 days later. And because my husband was in the military and I wasn't, I was over 26. So in the US at the time, I was off my parents' insurance. I didn't have any with the job I was at. And so we got married very quickly after our engagement so that I could get on his insurance to have our son. And I think just through that entire situation, I started harboring a lot of resentment. There was just a bunch of stuff that sort of festered, being thrust, quickly into this new type of life that I wasn't ready for. And I kind of let myself sit in that space for a long time and just found myself really, really unhappy with our marriage. The rest of my life, I loved my son. I loved, but I had, the big problem was that I had completely lost desire for my husband. And we had both sort of grown to this point where we didn't even have the friendship that we needed to even tackle that. And so for a long time, And I love telling my story because I feel like there are so many women and men out there who feel the same way and they just don't know what to do, or they feel like there's something wrong with them because they're looking at their friends, they're looking at social media, they're looking at what everyone else has going on and thinking, well, this is what my relationship should look like. Why doesn't it? And that was me. So for a really long time, I was like, what's wrong with me? I hear about my friends and their sex lives, which we know everyone kind of tends to talk things up a little bit. I'd see them together and how they were loving and doting. I'd, hear how they enjoyed nights together and would laugh together and make up games or whatever. They just had this relationship that we didn't have. And I felt bad because, one, I knew that my husband had to be seeing this too. And I knew that he probably wanted that too. But also because I didn't feel that connection to him that I needed to have to build this type of relationship. And on top of that, I'd pretty much lost I'd lost all desire for him in an intimate way. And so I found myself in this place of fear and anger and self-doubt and, wondering, am I going to have to live this way forever? I've committed to this man. Are we going to be stuck like this? I found myself thinking of doing things that were, I don't like to admit out loud, but, I was like, well, maybe something on the side, which I know sounds terrible, but you just find yourself in this position and you don't want to open up to that person because you're afraid that you're going to hurt them. Yeah. But you're also in your own torment of, I don't want to give this up forever. So I was in this just really big mental battle with myself for quite a while before I actually came across a podcast episode that really broke down what I thought at the time explained, and to an extent it still did, but explained a lot of what I was feeling, at least in terms of our sex life and our intimacy. And basically what this podcast said was that it's completely normal for women to lose desire in long-term relationships. It's just kind of the way we're wired, whereas men can just see something on the street and be like, yes, let's go. Women need a little more caressing and we like novelty. And they really broke it all down. And they weren't by any means saying, you can't make long-term relationship works, but they were saying, hey, if you're feeling this, first of all, this is normal. And that was the first moment for me when I'd ever heard anybody say, hey, what you're feeling is normal. Yeah. And it was such a weight lifted off my shoulder because I was like, okay, I'm not broken. Right. So, taking a step back really quickly, I think a lot of women find themselves in this position and we're told that we're dysfunctional. We're told that our sex drive is broken. I had all sorts of lab work done to see if my hormones were off, and I was disappointed when all of them came back normal. And so to sit here being like, well, part of me still misses, that part of my life. I don't think it's completely gone, but I just don't have desire for it at all because I wasn't seeking out other people. And so hearing this, I was like, this makes sense. And I'm not crazy and I'm not alone. And other women do experience this. We just don't talk about it because when you love someone, you're supposed to automatically have feelings for them. And that's not always how things work. So, something else that they recommended in this podcast, they suggested a couple ways of working through this. One of them was to open up your relationship, to bring in, because your one partner is never going to fit every single aspect of you. And so I'm not suggesting that everyone open up your relationship. If you are in an open relationship and it works for you, that's beautiful. If you are like, nope, never, not me, that's fine too. But what we tend to do is, even when our partners don't fill those spaces, we have friends or we have other community people in our community who might kind of fill in those gaps for us. So I was like, okay, maybe my husband and I could try opening up our marriage. So I came to him and I'd been thinking on how I tell him that I'd lost desire for him for months. I'm like, how do you tell your husband, the father of your child, this person that you love in your own way? Because we hadn't really built the type of love that we're actually working on building now, that you don't have these feelings for him, because I knew it was going to crush him. And so I was like, hey, I've been wanting to talk to you about something. Can you please listen to this podcast because it explains everything that I'm feeling, and then can we talk about it? Luckily, he's very open. He already was familiar with the guy. It's Aubrey Marcus podcast. He's already familiar with him. He listened to a lot of his stuff. I know some people might be listening going, I could never even bring that to my husband. And I totally respect that. And I know that I'm very lucky in that regard. So he listened to it, and we ended up having a long conversation about it. And I tried to explain to him, I was like, it's not you. It's not that you've done anything wrong. It's just kind of how things work. Like, I can't control who I have desire for. I can't control that. It's kind of hard you just can't sometimes. Yeah. So he was open to the idea of opening up our relationship, but we didn't for 6 or 7 months. We kept it closed.
Okay. So when you said to him, I think you should watch or listen to this podcast, was there, building up to that point, had he sensed something wasn't right? So was there like something, was there, obviously it would have been a surprise to him to hear lost desire, but did he know something was coming?
I want to say yes and no. So I think for a long time, we both knew our relationship wasn't where we wanted it to be, but we hadn't really taken that deep look at it.
Okay.
We already weren't having a lot of sex. And when we were, it was like, it was just kind of, I'd go to bed trying to avoid it. I mean, I spent, probably at least a year avoiding it with him at all costs, and like living in this space of, and this is something I realized after the fact. And I think if you're kind of going through this, it's something to look for, but I avoided having fun with him. So even trying to build that friendship, I was worried that if I had a laugh with him or if we had a good time together, then he would take that as a sign to initiate. And I was like, well, I don't want that. So I just really started holding myself back. And then, we talked, he's like, I want our sex life to be better. I want us to do these things. But there was just a lot of me putting up walls, and also coming from him. And this could have ended up just have him mirroring me over the course of the years, and him just also starting to put up his own walls. And so now you have these two people who want a different relationship, but we've built walls so high up against each other, for each other, that starting to tear them down, we didn't even know where to start. Yeah. And we had a very passive aggressive relationship at that time. So I can easily say that neither one of us were as happy as either one of us wanted to be. I don't know that he fully expected that, but it was definitely, I don't think it was like this huge shock where he was like, oh my gosh, we were so happy. I didn't expect any of this. Yeah. I think he probably just didn't want to see it or to know, because it's easier sometimes not to.
So when you told him that you'd lost the desire for him, so you mentioned that, and then did you suggest that maybe we look at different ways that we can nurture and develop the relationship, like the open relationship? Was that part of that conversation? Did that come further on down the line?
No, that was part of that conversation. And so I'll say a lot of people don't like the choices that we made. We had some friends who definitely didn't like it. For obvious reasons. And looking back, I'm like, we probably could have gone about things differently, but I also firmly believe, I learned throughout the course of this journey, when from having the conversation to actually opening things up to we ended up separating for a little bit. I moved out for a year. I just moved back in at the beginning of December. There's no way, there's absolutely no way that I could have learned what I needed to learn had we not taken this route.
Okay.
People are like, well, you could have just separated. I'm like, well, and I'm sure once we get more into the story, I'll touch more on this. We could have, but we both had lessons we needed to learn in order, even for future relationships. And it's like, you could have gone to therapy, and the experiences that I got through how we did things, as messy as they got, because they got pretty messy, I couldn't have gotten sitting in a therapy chair. It just wouldn't it wouldn't have happened. And I'm not suggesting if you find yourself where I am to go, you'd be like, oh, well, I'm just going to open, my relationship. It was destructive and it was really messy and it got ugly at times. But to me, looking back, I'm like, for me, there was no other way. This is, how much I got out of it and the clarity that I received from it and the lessons that I learned were just, I don't know. I mean, we could have stayed separated, but I still would have learned those things. So I'm grateful for that experience and for what it taught me.
So you told him, you said that potentially we should explore relationships outside of the marriage. Did that happen? Was that something that happened for you guys?
It did, but it took a while. So I told him that we had the conversation. I know his ego took a little bit of a hit, and that was me. I was like, "It's not you, I promise." Yeah. Like it's so hard. I think for anyone to be like, "Oh, this is my partner," totally. They don't want to sleep with me. I'm like, it really has nothing to do with you. But my desire for him has been coming back. So.
And did he suggest, because that would be a hammer blow for anybody?
Yeah.
Regardless of whether he could have come and said that to you, it would have been a hammer blow.
Oh, for sure.
And at that point, because my opening gambit would be, I guess I'd be confused, but I would say, why don't we let's go and get some counseling. I'll book it tomorrow or I'll book it now. Did that come up in the conversation?
He suggested so actually the podcast we listened to with Aubrey Marcus, it was his ex-fiance. We got some coaching from her. So He did suggest that, but I don't think it was, I don't think either one of us had thought about counseling right away. And I don't know why. But again, I'm kind of grateful for the route that we took. So he was like, we need to start doing more work on ourselves. And for a few weeks after, because that was such an emotionally charged conversation, things got a little better. We did try to do work, but eventually we kind of just settled back into our normal routine. And so that has been something now that both of us are like, okay, we need to be very intentional. Relationships, what we're seeing, what we've learned is that there's a lot of intentionality behind it. That's the work everyone talks about. I mean, it goes deeper than that, but on the most basic level, it's just showing up intentionally for your partner.
Yeah.
Now for me, that's little things like we learned each other's love languages throughout this process. And he always used to get so upset because I would never tell him I was proud of him or tell him thank you. I'm really bad about thank yous. And we did that. And he's words of affirmations like up here for him. It's literally, it was like a 1 for me on the scale. So for me now it's like, okay, be intentional about saying things to him that he needs to hear. Okay.
So communication evolved.
Oh yeah, it evolved significantly. So we had this conversation. I don't think either of us were actually ready to open. I mean, I don't know if you can ever really say that, but neither one of us were really ready to open our relationship up at that time. And I didn't, it wasn't like I had anyone in mind or I was going to go get on dating apps, but it was just an idea that I had put out there. I needed him to know how I was feeling. I put this idea out there and he was open to it. And, nothing for a few months. And then I ended up becoming friends with another man and we kind of clicked. And after we both sort of acknowledged that we had feelings for each other, I came to my husband. I was like, hey, this happened. I would like to explore this. Would you be okay with that? And he was open to it. And so we actually both ended up dating other people.
So can I ask you a quick question? Do you think he was open to it? Or do you just think that he, just to, I don't know, not lose face or just to keep you, he just said, Yeah, I
think it was that.
Okay.
And I think he said, I'm open to it. And, but I really think that he was like, I don't want to lose her.
That's what I was trying to convey.
Yeah. And so, and that was another thing, people were like, well, should you be doing this because you know how he really feels, even though he never expressed that. And I think, months later, he finally may have said that. I'm like, well, you told me this the whole time. And I was so wrapped up in my own head that I was like, yeah, sure. I'll believe you if that's what you're saying. Like, we're trying to move into this new space of honesty and communication, and you're telling me this. So if you are lying to me, that's, to me, I was like, if you're not telling me the truth, being honest, that's on you. 1, 2, I never asked him to stay. I was like, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. And not to, I know this probably sounds bad, but I'm like, I didn't ask him to stay. I'd never put that. It was just like, hey, this is where we could go. Are you okay with this? If you're not, we don't have to be together anymore.
There were directions he could take, either left or right. And
it wasn't like, I was like, please suffer with me through this. And so that for me, I was like, I need to kind of explore and figure myself out. And I'm sorry. I know that this is not the best situation, but at the same time, it wasn't completely closed off to where, he made his decision and chose to stick through it. And I think that's also something else that I've really come back to is often in relationships, we'll sacrifice our happiness for the happiness of another. And that's what we had been doing for so long. Was I had been sacrificing my happiness because I didn't want to hurt him. And I'm not saying, to an extent, yes, you're going to have to, there's always going to be a give and take. No matter what you choose in life, there's going to be a sacrifice. So, but I think it gets so deep that we're like, well, I don't want to hurt this person, or I'm scared of what I'm going to lose. So I'm going to sacrifice my happiness to a deep level, which is where I had ended up. But in doing that, I wasn't showing up for him as the wife that he needed or wanted. And so in the selfishness of, maybe going out and exploring myself at the same time, it's, to me, just as selfish to stay and both of you be miserable.
Yeah.
And so either way, like looking back, I'm like, yeah, it probably was a little selfish. So we both ended up it wasn't a pretty moment in my life, but it was extremely expansive and extremely eye-opening.
So I guess there's no handbook for this. So you there's no manual that you can, that you can pull up and just. Oh yeah, there's no manual for any of it.
Yeah. Things that really helped me though. So at the beginning of this process, kind of along my journey of educating myself and learning and trying to shift my perspectives. First was that podcast, which was really helpful in just helping me feel like, hey, you're not alone. This is normal to lose desire. There are some things you can do. And I don't want to miss what was actually the big key for me in getting it back, because I think this is important, but we'll come back to it. The next 2 pieces of material that that kind of fell into my lap or came across me were Esther Perel. Are you familiar with her?
No, not at all.
Okay, she's amazing. She's a relationship. I want to say she's a psychologist. I'm not positive, but she works in relationships with couples who've had affairs. Her 2 books, The State of Affairs, and I can't think of the other one right now. She might have more than 2, but I read 2 of them and they were so eye-opening. I suggest anyone in a relationship, no matter whether it's happy or not, read them.
Okay.
Because I think it was A State of Affairs. She just talks about all the different reasons why people have affairs, why they seek other people. And even though we had been open about what we were doing with each other, obviously there was still extramarital relationships going on. And it I think really helped to paint a clearer picture for us both. And that when your partner, when you are seeking someone else, either in the situation that we did or secretly, and I'm again not condoning this or saying it's okay, but it really often has nothing to do with the partner, and it has everything to do with the person who's out there dealing with their own crap.
So it's more about you. It's more about you as an individual than your partner.
Yes. Okay. And they were just very enlightening and eye-opening, and that, and how she explains how you can kind of work back to come back home to your partner if that's what you want.
So did that kind of give you hope? Did that give you hope actually that this is normal and we can work through this?
Yes. So what I think I really realized reading her stuff was that I had this twisted perception of what love was supposed to look like. And actually, I was talking about this recently, and I kind of rethought that. I was like, maybe I didn't have a twisted perception of it, but it had been like, twisted in a way that I didn't understand how to implement it. I don't really know how to explain it.
Do you also think that you and your partner, there was a short courtship or sort of union? Do you think if there was, I don't know, say if you've been dating for a couple of years, and do you think that some of this could have been dealt with if there was a longer process, or do you think it would have come out at some point? It just came up.
No, and I'll explain. No, I think that because we dated for about a year and a half, we didn't really form the type of friendship that I'd like to have, that we're working on now. And that was me. And I told him, my parents were like, I'm surprised she's even getting married because of just who I am. And I'm like, I feel like if we hadn't found out that we were pregnant, then we probably would have never gotten married.
Okay.
But I've come to realize why I am this way, or what happened. And that came through the other relationship that I got into. And so that for me is why I think this was so important, because I don't know if there would have been any other way for me to really see it other than to be in it again. And basically what happened was this other relationship was really toxic.
Okay.
I mean, he just lied up and down. He was in and out. It was just a very unhealthy relationship, which I had found myself in throughout my life. But it never really clicked for me or made sense. And so when I found myself back in another relationship like this, where I was like, oh my gosh, I need this person. I'm so madly in love, which I wasn't. Like now I'm like, oh my, what was going on in my head? This really made me stop and think. I was like, I don't need this person like him. I'm addicted. Like I'm literally addicted to the highs and the lows of this relationship, because there were no in-betweens. It was either really, really good or really, really bad.
Okay.
And what I came to learn was that, around this time I'm getting into Esther Perel. I'm starting to do more work on myself. I'm starting to learn about how our childhood relationships influence our adult relationships. And I knew that my parents' relationship when I was growing up wasn't very healthy, but I didn't know a ton about it. And so I called my mom. I'm like, Mom, I feel like I'm repeating these patterns. Tell me more. And my parents are still married. They've been through a lot, but my dad had, his parents were borderline abusive, maybe abusive, given just the time that they grew up. His mom was severely depressed. So he just didn't have the best childhood. His parents weren't really there for him, I think, in the way that he needed. And so when him and my mom got married, he was so afraid that she was going to leave him. Their relationship was really high highs, really low lows. As my brother and sister, go ahead.
So I was thinking, so do you think inevitably, regardless of whether you're with your current husband or you with somebody else, that this would have come up somewhere along the line for you? Probably.
And that's why I think, so this is when I realized also that I had a choice. I was like, okay, I see this pattern, and I still hadn't reconnected to the feelings that I needed from my husband. And so around this time, I was like, I recognize this pattern. I recognize that I have some perceptions around love and relationships that are not in line with with reality. Like I'm looking for this rom-com relationship or like Disney fairy tale relationship that just isn't, it's that's not what they look like. I mean, some very lucky people have those amazing relationships that just seem effortless. But so I started realizing a lot of things. I was like, okay, first of all, I'm addicted to this type of relationship pattern, this toxicity, and now I can see where it comes from. So I can start to break that down. Because I'd never recognized it before. And then I also realized that I was perceiving things in a way that weren't really in line with reality or how to grow a healthy relationship. And I started to recognize these things. We still separated because I was like, I don't know how to connect to you right now. I can't. I'm just, the feelings that I need to make this relationship work the way we both want it to still weren't there. And I knew that it wasn't fair to him to keep trying to kind of drag things along at this point, because I had hoped that maybe, if we try open, then that will kind of reconnect us in some way. Or so I think I just needed space to think and to really observe what was going on with myself and to question things and to break things down. And so as I started getting more clear on all of this, I was like, I have a choice now. If he's open to it, of course, is to either I can go repeat this pattern with someone else, or if he's willing, I can start to work on it with him and try to break more of it down.
Okay.
And so I came to him and I was just like, I feel like I've recognized a lot. I've come to see a lot. And I think I know what we can do to try to work on some of this stuff. And so we got back together. We sort of like, to an extent, wiped the slate clean and started fresh, mostly in terms of kind of our communication, because that was a big thing, which at the beginning of open, we started communicating like crazy in ways we never had, because it was like, okay, well, if we're going to be open, we're going to be open with everything. So we're going to talk to each other. We're going to check in. We're going to do all of these things.
And how did that feel? And how did that feel being changing? Because you have to change. There's a shift, but how did that feel at the start of the journey where you were being? Did it feel natural? Did it feel normal? Did it feel difficult? What did that feel like?
It was definitely uncomfortable at times, for sure. Now, I mean, even now, it's starting to feel more comfortable. I think it's one of those things where it's like, all right, and this is where I think a lot of people end up remaining stuck, is because this conversation is going to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to have it. And so instead they just push it down, resentment builds, or any, the stillness, it starts to grow, and you find yourself in this place where you're just like, oh, how do I come back from this? Which is where I was for and I mean, I think that's where I was for so long. I was like, I don't even know how to come back from this, that I just exploded everything. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to blow it all up. And that's not, there's no way we can't ignore this situation at this point. So it was uncomfortable at times, for sure, but it was what we needed. Because we got comfortable having some hard conversations. Okay. And so both of us, for a while before any of this, I mean, if I would irritate him, he wouldn't say anything. He just kind of left it. Or if we got into conversations, we wouldn't really get anywhere. And so since we've gotten back together, our communication has gotten a lot better. If he or I does something that irritates the other, we'll just come out and say, hey, this upset me, this is why, and it's open. It's not like we don't, for the most part, we try not to get defensive. We try to be open about what the other person is saying, and it's gotten a lot better. Okay.
And are you having to be, is that being more honest? Is that being more polite? Are you having to tiptoe? What does that look like in terms of like an interaction? Is it, if that makes sense, the question?
Honestly, and I know this probably isn't the best way, but I will text it a lot, so it makes it easier. Okay. And not that it makes it easier, but I tend to think better when I can get all my words out. So something else I've done in the past, and I still, which nothing really big has come up recently, but I always recommend this to anyone if you're having a hard time with a conversation. Texting probably isn't the best way, but I like, because you can read it. Write a letter. Okay. And so before all of this, we did some letter writing, but it gives you the opportunity when you put it down into words, whether it's email, whether it's text, whether it's in a letter, and we always come back. So it's not like we'll have a conversation over text and then just, we'll come back and be like, okay, we discussed this. Now let's talk about it in person. But for me, the way I kind of operate, I'm like, I need to get everything out. And if I'm having a face-to-face conversation, I'm either going to forget what I wanted to say, or he's going to interject and it's going to distract me, or the conversation is going to go in opposite direction. So I'm like, I just need to get out what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. It also allows me to control my tone in a different way. I think it can be misconstrued, I think, via words. And, but sometimes when we're speaking, things just don't come out in a way that we mean. It can shape things. So
I kind of get that, because sometimes when you're having those really those spontaneous conversations when it might be a difficult moment, invariably we don't put our best, foot forward, and we might misrepresent ourselves. So the idea of taking a moment and just putting it down via letter, I kind of get that, because the tone, you can deal with the tone, and you might be able to put, a little bit more context around the point you're trying to make.
Yeah. I will. There have been times though when I'm like, maybe text wasn't the best idea, because sometimes you get kind of lost. So I'm definitely not saying that it's the best way.
Okay.
But I'm being honest here with, this is how I do it.
Yeah.
So not, I definitely think that face-to-face conversation is the ultimate, but even because I'm dealing with some employee drama right now, and I have 2 employees that are like, need to hash it out. And I'm like, told one of them, I was like, write a letter or make bullet points so you don't forget anything, because sometimes you want to cover everything that you're feeling, everything that you're thinking. So even if you just make bullet points and come into the conversation and say, okay, I wanted to talk about this. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. So before all of this happened, we did tiptoe around each other. We had a very passive aggressive relationship, and just kind of, he would speak to me very arrogantly. And I'm sure, and I'm not blaming him for this, I'm sure that I fed that at least to an extent. But this is what was so powerful in me really getting my desire back for him, was recognizing, this happened probably a couple months ago, really. It hit me hard that I didn't feel safe around him because of how our relationship had been for so long. And I told him the same thing. I was like, I think you don't feel safe around me, and not in a he's going to physically harm me sort of way, but in a, we've been interacting in this way for so long that I was walking on eggshells.
Okay.
And even though we had been doing all of this work, that was something that had been trained into my body that I wasn't physically aware of. So physiologically, and I saw somebody I follow on Instagram wrote a really great blog on this. But basically he was saying, even if in her mind she wants you, if her body doesn't feel physiologically safe, which is something that she may not be aware of, she's not going to be able to open up to you sexually.
Okay.
And that's men and women. And I noticed this from a teeny tiny little shift I had in a conversation we were having. I realized that I had been bracing myself around him all the time. So what happened was, he came home from work one day and we were in the middle of a conversation. I said something to him because I've been trying to be more open about who I am and about what I believe and my coaching and kind of my woo-woo stuff. And he believes it, but doesn't. He's on the fence. And so I sort of held that part of myself back. But he came home one day and we started having this conversation. I expressed something to him and he responded in an open and loving way. And I noticed my body relax.
Oh, really?
And it was in that moment that I was like, and then, so I kind of noticed that and I was like, oh, that was interesting. I didn't really pay a ton of attention to it, but then I came across this blog literally like later that day or the next day where he was talking about feeling this safety. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. I was like, I've been bracing myself for the interaction that we had been having with each other for years, because I didn't feel safe to open up, because I was always expecting him to respond to me with a tone or with arrogance or with annoyance or, and in which most cases I would just shut myself back down. And now that we've been working on each other and working on opening up more, he's responding to me differently. And in that moment, my body like finally caught on and was like, oh, you can breathe. Like, it's okay. We can have this conversation. And that was so powerful for me.
And did you tell him about that?
I did. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I sent him that blog actually. And I was like, I think that part of the problem with with our desire is I don't feel safe around you. And I told him this, I was like, and if I'm honest, I don't think you feel safe around me either, because we were mirroring each other for so long. It wasn't just him being arrogant to me. It was me doing the same thing to him. And so now really bringing this intentionality about how we speak to each other. And I caught myself the other day just in my own mood, kind of being snotty with him for no reason. I was like, Dianne, stop it. But it's stuff like that if you don't catch it and it keeps on, we would end up back where we were.
Okay.
So it's been, realizing that and then being very intentional about how we speak to each other and our tone and being open to what the other has to say. Or in my case, when I'm feeling like he's speaking down to me, or when he's, doesn't agree with because if he doesn't agree with what you say, the way he comes across is like you're a complete idiot and he's always right.
Okay.
Which I don't think he means that, but it's just his tone. And so I'll tell him, I'll be like, this is how you came across. And he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us can empathize that. We've all been in those situations where somebody, it can come across as, you might ask an innocent question, and the way that they position it is like, come on, man, you should know that. You should. And it's like, well, so it kind of does put your back out a little bit.
Yeah. So, and that's, so we've had those conversations, but that was huge. I mean, and it was crazy. It was such a tiny little thing that happened, but it was so powerful. And this is where, in my coaching, my number one thing is I'll tell everyone, like, if you just practice self-awareness at a deep level, it will be the most powerful thing you can ever do for yourself, ever. I don't care how many coaches you hire. I don't care how many therapists you see. I don't care what you do. Practicing that just radical self-awareness, not only of the mind, but also of the body, will be so powerful for you. And it's totally free.
Yeah. And is that what, because obviously I mentioned at the top that you had your own meal prep business, and that now you're coaching and you're working with lots of people, helping them transition sort of their life to find a life that they want to have. Did coaching come out of this relationship? Do you think there was a direct correlation between the relation situation and you taking sort of a different route in terms of wanting to support other people?
It shifted the direction of what I wanted to coach. So originally I wanted to business coach, because I tend to get bored. Like, I'm bored with my business right now. I'm trying to get out from under it, my meal prep company. I love it. It's my baby. I built it from the ground up, but I'm just like, okay, I don't really want to grow it anymore. And there's, we're just kind of moving along. And so I originally wanted to move into the business coaching space, because I was like, oh, this will be a really great way for me to stay on my toes, because I'll be helping other business owners, but not actually have to start my own other business. Yeah. But as our relationship shifted, and as I started doing this work, and as I started seeing these things, I really was like, wow, this is fascinating to me. One, and two, I feel like, to me, on the business side of things, most of the information that you need in order to grow your business is easily accessible if you just know where to look. Yeah. Do you need some individualized coaching? Yes. But what I saw most of the problem was with actual implementation and getting out of your own way. So I sort of shifted into business mindset coaching. And then I just really fell in love with all of the work that I had been doing on myself and how powerful it has been for me, and wanting to really help people with, not just in the business community, but anyone who is just struggling or just wanting to even get to know themselves better, because just that in and of itself has been such a powerful and exciting journey for me that I think it's so fun. It can definitely be hard at times. You have to look at some parts of yourself where you're like, oh, that's kind of ugly, but you still love them anyway. And it's thrilling to me. I love it.
Which is important to have. You can see the smile in your face and the elation when you talk about it. I'm like, that says something in itself.
So yeah, I love it. So that's where I am. I'm actually in the process right now. I don't know that I want to do a lot of one-on-one coaching anymore. So I'm working on building out like my signature program. Okay. But I'm kind of taking my time with it and just enjoying. And are you familiar with human design? Did we talk about that?
No. I'd be lying if I said I'm not familiar with it. So
that's totally fine. It's an astrology based thing, but I'm kind of leaning into that a little bit.
Do educate me a little bit. Is that what you're going to be teaching people?
I do. I teach people?
Okay. Yeah. Is that?
Well, I'm learning. I'm pretty new to it, but I kind of dove really deep into it. So I am starting to teach. It's an astrology, sort of. I don't want to completely butcher it, but it goes off your birth date, time, and place. So astrology to a pretty big extent, but it centers around the energy that you are open to receiving from others and that you put out into the world, I think is the simplest way to explain it.
Okay. And that's interesting because that can help with relationships, right? Because of,
yes.
So you seem tailor-made for that because of the journey that you've been through.
It's so fun. Yeah. And my husband, every time I'm like, it's my human design, he just kind of rolls his eyes at me because he doesn't fully buy into it all. But for me, it's been, and so I tell people, I'm like, even if you're looking at these things that seem a little too woo-woo, you can still say, hey, is this me? Is this not me? Am I showing up this way? Am I not? Or there were even things within what I've been learning about human design where I'm like, oh, I've recognized this in myself, but I just kind of thought everyone dealt with it. And now I'm realizing that they don't, and that I can actually lean into what I'm actually feeling and not beat myself up over it or feel bad about it or feel like I'm a weirdo or whatever.
No, it sounds interesting.
It's been really interesting for me. And interesting to see, it kind of explains how we interact with people in different ways, whether it's true or not, if you believe in it, but still be like, oh yeah, I definitely see how I do that. So now I'm aware of it. I can work on it. One thing going back, go ahead.
No, carry on.
Yeah. So one thing going back to relationships is within human design, we have 9 energy centers, kind of like your chakras. But according to human design, we added 2 more. I don't remember when. Please, if you're really into this and you're listening and I'm kind of butchering this, I'm new, forgive me. But your emotional energy center, if it's closed, this might be kind of getting deep, but if it's closed, you sort of have your own emotional energy that other people can't influence. But if it's open, you can be open to the influence of emotions of others. So if I'm in a bad mood and you're in a good mood and I go sit next to you, I can kind of feed off your good mood energy and it will lift me up. The other thing is if you get angry and somebody else is open, like so both my husband and I have these open centers. If I come to him and I'm a little angry, he takes it and he amplifies it and he sends it back out. So he'll get even angrier. And then because mine's open, I take in his more anger and amplify it and send it back out. And so it just kind of escalates.
That's so interesting.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what human design says we do. And this is exactly what we do. And he's like, whatever. But it shows you like, hey, this is sometimes how people operate. And in our case, knowing, which I've sort of naturally done this anyway. If I get really upset, I'll leave and he doesn't like that. But I'm like, I just need to calm down so I can think. But it's what, it says is like, if you find yourself in this situation where your emotions are running really high because you're feeding off of the energy of another, step away, get out of their energy for a little bit until you can calm yours down and think about why you're actually upset and then go back and have a conversation.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And I think that there's a lot of people who can benefit from that right now because we're all invariably quite closed up together because of the pandemic and whatnot. So I definitely think human design is something we should look at. It's an incredible journey that you and your husband have been through. How are things now? Have you found the desire? Is that still work in progress? What does that look like now for you guys?
It's gotten a lot better. I think it's not exactly where either of us want it to be quite yet, but it's getting a lot better. I think there are a couple more points I wanted to. No.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. I mean, but related to this. So just backtracking a couple months ago, because I think this is really important. I found myself kind of wrapped up in my head again. It was right before I moved back in with him. And I was wrapped up in my head. I was like, I don't have any space. I'm feeling trapped again because it's how I felt before all of this. Like, I feel trapped. I feel like I just can't, so I had kind of found myself in that headspace again of thinking these things and of feeling like, oh, he doesn't give me my space and blah, 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 which was 100%, first of all, not true. And so I kind of sat in that for about a week. And I finally was like, Dianne, what is going on? And what I realized was that I was living in this past experience that I had of him. So we both had shifted our relationship. We were both showing up for each other in a new, healthier way. But I had kind of like put the old lens back on and was sort of creating my own story in my mind about how I was experiencing him, even though that wasn't what was actually happening. So I think for a lot of people, when you're unhappy in any relationship, it could be a romantic relationship. It could be like I was talking about my employees earlier. One of them literally will create this story in her mind and she will not let it go. And she'll just hold it against the other person, even though everyone else can see something completely different.
And are you able to tell them that?
I'm trying to figure out how.
Okay. I'll let you work on that one.
No, I'm like, oh my God, how do I say this to her? I've been trying to ask her questions. So I'm trying to figure out how to ask the right questions to get to that. But I've been trying to ask other questions so that she can come to it on her own without me being like, will you do this?
Yeah.
But I was like, wow, I'm living in this either a past idea or an idea. So we go into relationships with an idea about what we think it should look like. We put this rose-colored lens on, and as we're in the relationship longer and longer, and we're like noticing more things about our partner and they don't fit that idea that we have created for them anymore, we find ourselves dissatisfied. So anyway, it could be friendship, it could be a coworker, it could be a boss, your partner, family members. If you're like, this relationship for some reason isn't making me happy or I'm dissatisfied with it, first stop and ask, are you actually seeing reality or are you seeing some story that you've created? And I don't mean this in a negative, I don't mean this in a bad way or to judge you, but a lot of the time that's where we sit. And
so when you're taking that moment, do you need to go for, are there things we can do? Can we go for a walk? Can we, just to give us that headspace where we're making more of an informed decision on what's going on?
Yeah, I did it journaling. So I think I sat down 1 minute to journal and I was like, what is coming up for me here? Why am I sitting in this space? And I was like, okay, I felt like I was trapped. So I was like, he doesn't give me any space. And so I stepped back. I was like, is this true? I'm like, I don't even live with him right now. We see each other at that point. It was most nights of the week. He would at least come over for dinner, or I would go over there for dinner because we still have our son. And we were together at that point. We were planning on moving back in. So yeah, get out of the house, go for a walk, journal. But for me, at least, all I needed to do was to see that, and it immediately dropped.
Yeah.
And this is why and my experiences with just self-awareness and being willing to look at yourself and see things, a lot of the time, just the recognition of what's coming up for you is enough for it to shift or to drop. And it was like, I had this veil up and I was like, I'm seeing things through this veil. I don't like what I'm seeing. I'm irritated. And I was like, let me just lift the veil up a little bit and see what's actually going on. I was like, oh, none of that's happening. And then the veil just dropped. And I immediately felt better. And I immediately was like, oh, I'm excited to move back in with him. And so often it's just that awareness is enough for the shift to happen, but it's being willing to look at yourself and say, maybe this is me, which a lot of people don't like doing. And being willing to show yourself compassion through that. So I think that's the really big thing, is to say, I might see things that I don't like along this journey, but I'm going to be compassionate towards myself regardless, and know that I'm human and this is part of the human experience and we're not perfect. So, so that was really big. If you're struggling, really look at, are you viewing this through some past experience or an idea that isn't in line with reality? What is reality?
It's incredible that you've navigated this journey and you're so insightful about self-awareness and, journaling and all that type of thing, based on the fact that you've, so counseling hasn't figured prominently in your journey. So you've done it without counseling and stuff.
We did start seeing, we did see a counselor, actually after we got back together, and we basically sat down. She's like, so what can I help you guys with? Because we had both done so much work around ourselves, that she was like, most people come to me when they're, in the midst of a problem. You guys are coming to me after you've already worked through it.
Yeah.
So it was good because I think she validated some stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas me saying, oh, this is how I feel, or this is what I'm thinking, and my husband's just like, well, no, that can't be, or him feeling isolated. It was nice to go to someone who was like, no, I see couples struggling with this all the time, and you guys are doing a pretty good job. She gave us homework, so that was good. She held us accountable for a little bit. But actually we saw her a week or two ago and we left 30 minutes early. We were like, we don't really have anything right now. So we're going to see her, I think, once every 3 to 6 months, unless anything big comes up. But
yeah, it must be interesting for her to see the progress, just listen to your journey and how you've mapped out a lot of this for yourselves. That must be quite interesting for her or him. I don't know whether it's a her or him.
Yeah, I think she's just kind of like, I don't know what to do with you guys. But, so it's been, and I'm not saying that you should skip therapy at all. We just kind of took our own route and we did what we felt. My mom pushed us to go to therapy for a while and we were like, no, we're doing our own thing. And again, I'm going to stick to it. Maybe down the road, as I learn more and discover more, I'll be like, well, maybe we should have, but I really feel like maybe just because of who we are. And I had already sort of started my journey of self-awareness, if you will, and looking at myself. And so I was open to doing more of it. But I think that I needed to go through things the way that we did in order to see what I needed to see and break down the things I needed to break down and actually experience them. Because I'm like, I could have gone to therapy and yeah, we could have dug into my past relationships and maybe she could have pointed those things out. But I feel like I needed to be in the experience of it again, of the toxic relationship again, of, working through communication, of letting the anger out that we had just built up for years, the resentment, to really be able to understand it. And that could just be me. I'm like, I need to experience it to understand it. So,
yeah. So it's brave of you to talk so openly about something that's so personal, sort of on a podcast. Is that therapy for you as well? Is that part of the healing? Is that part of the helping others who might be? Is there something there that supports you and helps you and heals you?
Yeah, it definitely, when I started, so I actually started telling our story last year. When I started telling it, I didn't think of it as therapy. I wanted to tell people because I felt so alone for so long that I knew other people were feeling the same way. Plenty of people didn't like how we did things. Plenty of people, we lost some friends along the way, which, as you change, as you grow, as you shift, it happens. But I was like, I felt so isolated and so alone, and there aren't people talking about this. So for me, it originally started, and it still mostly is just like, I just want anyone out there who's feeling like I was feeling to know you're not alone.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to go the path that I went, but know that you're not alone. Know what you're feeling is normal. Know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But it also, it kind of did sort of also work as a therapy session. I realized that I was talking about it, and it did help give me more clarity. As I talked to, at first it was just me doing live IGTVs, and then talking to other people. And I was like, oh, I'm, talking about this. Now I see something that I hadn't seen before. But and it was really powerful because as I began sharing, people that I knew, people that I didn't know would just reach out to me and message me and say, I've been struggling with this and I've been struggling with this, and nobody knows, or just, just an outlet to tell somebody where they may not have felt safe to do so otherwise. And so the other part was wanting to create a safe space to say, hey, you're normal. We have these human desires, these primal animal instincts that we've tried to suppress, we've tried to push down, we've tried to ignore. And if you have them, it's okay. It doesn't mean you have to act on them, but denying them doesn't do you any good. So just all of it.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. And I'm sure there's people that are going through this process, but they haven't had the conversation because they just don't know how to. You basically you guys just went in, had the conversation, and you've had to deal with everything up to this point. And I'm sure. Sorry?
Rip that Band-Aid off. I mean,
you have. It's an incredible journey. And so how do you guys feel now? Are you sort of stronger? Are you more confident? Are you still work in progress? What does that look like for you guys now?
Yeah, it's getting a lot better. The last couple of weeks we've been sort of down. I had a surgery a few weeks ago that I've been recovering from, and then my just tired, and we have a toddler. So remembering to come back to intentionality. So I think right now that's a real big thing. I have gotten desire back. I'm holding onto it, hoping it doesn't like float away again. It's not as strong as I think I would like it to be, but it's better than nothing for me. I don't even like saying this, but it was to a point before where I was almost repulsed by him. And I know that sounds terrible, but now I'm actually like, oh yeah, there are times where I'm like, I want to go. Like, you know, so that has gotten better. And I think for him, I have to remind him, like, this is going to be, it's a slow process. Every time we open up to each other a little bit more, and it's little things. So I completely walled myself off. So he doesn't see it as much. I have to remind him that, hey, even when you don't think that we're working, I'm doing work behind the scenes. It could be as simple as sitting on the couch together and me allowing myself to laugh in front of him, which sounds ridiculous, but I'd held myself back from that for so long. Or even dancing in front of him or singing with our son, just being open and being myself. It's these little moments where I can show up as who I am, and he accepts that of me, and he can show up as who he is, and I don't slap a judgment on it, which I used to do, that have started to rebuild that. Noticing the safety was huge. Something else for people going through this, I will say that putting pressure on sex is not the way to build it back up. He kind of thought that maybe if we like tried different things or did different stuff, that our sex life would respark. And I was like, no, we got to heal everything around it. He finally got it. I gave him the analogy. It hit one day. We went on a walk, and I was like, I feel like our sex life right now is a broken leg, and you're trying to heal it by walking on it, when in reality, like, we need to support it. And it finally clicked for him. He was like, oh, I get it. And so I was like, you got to take the pressure off of that. Like, take the pressure off of us having sex. Let's cuddle on the couch with, no expectation. And I think after that conversation, it really hit him, and he sort of allowed that shift within himself. And around that same time, I think, is when I noticed the safety, like a bunch of things really started coming up for me as we had been reestablishing our relationship and rebuilding our friendship. And so once he sort of relaxed into that and gave me the space, was also when I was like, okay, now it's coming back for me, because I'm not, we're not walking on that broken leg anymore.
That's an interesting analogy. And I guess from him as well, because he's gone through this process with you, something that, because he's gone on a journey without even knowing that he was going to go on this journey, in terms of the self-awareness and just becoming aware of how to build a relationship and how to become more considerate and all these things that most guys, I'm generalizing a little bit, so there's probably guys that listen to this and Paul, what are you talking about? But guys, I think we're wired a wee bit differently. So in terms of awareness and stuff like that, we're always in tune with that, because we think about masculinity and we think about all these different things that don't necessarily align with self-awareness. So he's been, I'm sort of giving him a pat on the back for actually sticking with it and going and sort of being open to understanding you. Yeah, he definitely deserves a pat on the back.
It'd be fun to hear his side of the story. We haven't really talked about it in a while. This like sharing is sort of my thing, but he did say a while, probably like 6 months or so, he's like, maybe one day I'll start to share on his version. But yeah, it's been a very empowering and eye-opening journey, and we're definitely on the right track right now. It's just like I said, it's a lot of intentionality.
Okay.
So and it's catching when you're not. The other day, I think after my surgery, I was on prescription drugs and they make me really irritable, and I snapped at him and I was like, I'm so sorry. It's catching that and be like, because normally I just would have snapped and let it go, but I was like, I'm sorry, it's not you, it's the drugs. So being very intentional and being very mindful, because I still will catch myself sometimes kind of slipping back into old ways and just, being, and I'm like, stop. Nope, that's not what I want for myself. And then noticing when the walls are up. So we have a date night tonight. We're supposed to go play trivia. Cool. So it's like, allow myself to have fun and to enjoy our company and to not hold back like I used to. So, I mean, it's for both of us, but yeah, it's definitely getting better. We're on the right path. We probably could be a little more intentional about our time together, but it's much better than it used to be. And I'm not dreading, the future. And I think that he's a lot happier than he was too. So,
okay. Well, I'm pleased to hear the progression. I've really enjoyed this. And just in relation to the coaching, maybe you can tell the listeners how, because do you coach it just in the States? Because obviously you're in America, or can it be people overseas? How does that work? What does that look like?
Yeah, it can be anywhere. So I'm kind of not really in a transition phase. I'm leaning into my human design, if you will, a little bit.
Yes.
Which is probably a conversation for a whole other day, but it's kind of tying to the masculine. I've found myself in this sort of masculine work energy for so long. And in the coaching space, it hasn't seemed to work very well for me. And so I'm sort of taking a step back. I have a program that I love it. It's a great program, but I want to make it my basically like signature life program. Okay. So it's still available, but I'll be adding to it. I want to make it really, really in-depth, really intensive. It's something that you can repeat throughout your life, even now as it is. But I want it to be a little more integrative. I want to add, it's mostly kind of a lot of self-awareness, but I want to add some energetics into it, a little bit of, I'm recording some meditations for it, some body scans to start tuning into your body. So that is going to be my main coaching program, which will be available either by itself that you can just run through or in a group.
Okay.
I will not sure quite when officially I'm relaunching it. It'll be within the next few months, but I'm kind of right now just sharing a lot. So if you want more from me, the best place to find me is Instagram. I'm doing live videos. I'm doing some stuff on Clubhouse. I'm doing a lot of podcasts with other people, slowly working on my own podcast. I have a few episodes out, but I will put it on the back burner. So I'm trying to provide as much free value as I possibly can right now to really kind of find exactly how I want to help shape my life and the lives of others. Okay.
So your Instagram and your website, I can put those on the show notes.
Yep.
So people can contact you via those platforms. And when you've got this program together, I definitely want to hear more about it, because it sounds amazing, and you've really been through the journey. So you're the person to really teach people about self-awareness and is it human design?
Yeah. So the program, I might have a little bit of human design in it, but mostly it's really building strong. I mean, so just briefly, like we get into clarity. So I think a lot of people skip that part of their life. Like, I think I know what I want. Like, no, what do you really want? Like, what are you really seeking? And come back to that, because we forget. Looking at limiting beliefs, lots of shadow work. So really, most of what I did throughout this process was shadow work. It was looking at the parts of myself that I'd hidden away, locked away, didn't want to see, and bringing them out, playing with them, which was my open relationship, letting them a little too free. But so also seeing that, I'm like, I know now how to healthfully integrate those parts of myself. And so teaching others how to do the same. And then some alter ego creation, because that has also, we didn't talk about it, but that was also pretty powerful for part of my relationship. But yeah, it's just a lot of really getting to know yourself really well and integrating everything that you have to offer with how you show up. Okay.
Substantial. It sounds like a substantial package people will be getting.
Yes. I want it to be like, you're going to be like, if you're not ready to do the work, it's not going to be for you.
Yeah. And if you're going to do something, let's do it properly. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're getting towards the end now. I have a recurring question to ask everybody, which is, if Dianne could invite 3 inspirational people for dinner, Who would Dianne invite?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so since we talked about it, I think Esther Perel would be a good one. So I'd invite her. And then I thought Carl Jung, because I do love this. Loving shadow work. And it's just so fascinating to me. So Carl Jung, Esther Perel, and the third person, I have no idea.
Okay.
Who would it be? Like the first person that comes to my mind is Tony Robbins, but I feel like if I had more time to like think on it, it'd be someone else.
Okay. Well, Tony, I think Tony would be a great invite. I think he'd give you lots of insights. You could pick his brains.
Ooh.
You would, I think he'd find your story, really incredible. So, I think he'd be a good third person.
I think. Or are you familiar with Anthony DeMello?
I'm not. No.
It would be maybe him. He wrote the book Awareness, which I recommend to anyone. It is. But maybe him. Just be curious on his philosophy.
Okay. He sneaks into your third person then.
Yeah, him or Tony.
Okay. Well, there's tossing up between those two is not two good options.
Yeah.
So you've done well. Dianne, thank you so much. I really, really, really enjoyed your braveness and your openness to tell your story. Definitely be keen to connect with you again to see how things have gone. I have my fingers crossed that they go in the right direction, and do keep me posted on human design. Definitely want to know more about that. So thank you everybody for listening to My Perfect Failure. Please, you can find me at www.myperfectfailure.com, and please look out for the next episode of My Perfect Failure. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.